Boy, do we need this book. There's a lot to keep track of, and the fact that this book exists is a commentary on the historic nature of what's happening right now with a man who was president, wants to be president again. So can you talk first, Melissa, just take a step back and what you wanted to accomplish with this book, which is sort of walk us through it again and explain what it all means.
So we are law professors, and then we come on at night on MSNBC and explain the law to your viewers. And this is a moment where Americans are going to be watching these trials, and they may not have law degrees, or they may practice law but in a different area. And how do they make sense of these indictments? How do they make sense of these unprecedented times? So we wanted to collect all of these indictments to really granularly annotate them so people could follow along and understand what the trials meant, what was going on during the trials, what the indictment charges mean, and then relate it back to their own understanding of what these historic times mean for them as they go to the ballot box in November to likely weigh in on whether or not they, a jury of peers, are going to accept this person as their president going forward.
It's difficult enough for us, Andrew, who cover it, and for you, even as a brilliant legal analyst, I'm sure, to keep track of all this. People living their lives go, okay, I know there are two things going on in New York, his businesses and the hush money payment, and then there's Georgia, and then you got the federal cases. It's just a lot to wade through.
Exactly. So the idea is that you have this, so that as the Manhattan case is starting, you can turn to the Manhattan chapter and you can read, here are the charges. What do they mean? What does the language mean? How do you put it in context so that you have this? Who are the people? Just to the cast of characters. There's such an important moment right now where what's happening in the courts is so relevant to what's happening sort of in the real world. And as Melissa said, in the decision that everyone's going to have to make. Our job, as we do daily, is to try and translate that for people. So this is really trying to demystify that process so people can keep dipping in and saying, okay, I understand what's going on.
So, Professor Murray, let's turn to some of the cases, and let's start with the one that is on the horizon, the New York case, the hush money case, just now, less than a month away from scheduled to start. What are a few things that you have in here that we need to know?
So I think one thing that's really interesting about the New York Manhattan DA's case is that it's sort of an amuse-bouche for what comes later. And I think Alvin Bragg has begun talking about it in this way as well. This is about a species of election interference, paying someone hush money in order to keep an indiscretion not only from your wife, but also from the American electorate. That's what's alleged in this indictment. And so we connect these dots. And it's actually even bigger, I think, than the tag hush money trial makes it out to be. You know, this was a situation where you were not only paying hush money, falsifying business records to do that, allegedly, but you were also involving a media titan, the National Enquirer, as part of this catch and kill scheme to keep these indiscretions from the American public. And so you see this laid out in Manhattan DA's indictment. It's going to play out in the trial. But more importantly, it also relates to what later comes in the other indictments and the other trials that may also happen, because this is sort of a precursor to what's also charged in those other indictments. Again, election interference, only this time on a much broader scale.
Andrew, as you point out in the book, some of these checks are alleged to have been signed while Donald Trump was in the White House, while he was president of the United States. So we know that his defense team is filing all kinds of motions and trying to keep Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen off the witness stand, and on and on and on. How do you see this playing out?
Well, what's really interesting, when we were writing this, we were noticing that this is about criminality that's charged for before he was president, while he was president, and after he was president. I mean, this is sort of an incredible array of crimes. Let's take the Florida case, where he recently filed another motion saying that he's immune. But of course, that happened after he was president. So if you think the D.C. case was sort of outlandish to say I can kill people without being held criminally to account for that, this is actually saying in a case after he is president, oh, you know what, I can do that too. And I suspect he would like to say, even before I was president, I can do it. Those are all not great arguments, but they buy him something, which is delay. We're sitting here today waiting for the Supreme Court to decide whether Judge Chutkan in the D.C. case can give that a green light. And that is what he gets, even when he's making arguments that are plainly frivolous. And then one thing Melissa and I have really talked about is it is important to, even though we're keeping an eye on sort of what will ultimately happen in criminal trials, Donald Trump now is telling us who he is by the arguments that he is making about saying the president should not be held to be criminally liable for, killing people, or he can take classified documents and that should be legal. That is telling us now something about who is running for office.
Yeah, and the immunity question, Mika, Donald Trump effectively said, yeah, actually, I think I could use SEAL Team 6 to take out one of my political opponents and enjoy immunity to do that.
Yeah. Yep. No, he said that, and it just doesn't make any difference among Republicans, but put that aside for now. Andrew, I'm curious, because you mentioned that he has this delay tactic, he buys time. Are any of these criminal trials, do any of them pack a consequential punch if convicted in time before the election, or can they all have time be bought on them by the attorneys and delayed and delayed and delayed?
So I think I would say that in the prediction mode, I would say Florida and Georgia are ones that I would not put my money on them happening before the general election. But I do think that obviously New York is about to happen, and that is going to go forward. And I think D.C., depending on what the Supreme Court does, and sort of the betting is that they're not going to take the case, and so that would also allow that case to go forward. And I think, leaving aside what happens in terms of whether there's a conviction or not, one of the things that will happen that obviously Donald Trump does not want to happen is there will be facts laid out in court for people to see, for us to cover, so that what the public is seeing is not just Donald Trump's spin and what he wants to say publicly, which can be false. This is one where it'll be incumbent on the government to prove its case, but there will actually be a sort of that daily drip, drip, drip of factual evidence in both the Manhattan case and in the D.C. case when that goes. And I do suspect both of those will happen before the election.
So, Melissa, Andrew mentioned Georgia. That case has been sort of mired over the last couple of weeks in whether Fani Willis split the dinner bill on a trip to Belize with somebody and who paid cash for what. But taking a step back, the evidence in the case, there's a phone call.
Yeah.
There's a phone call where the President of the United States is asking for the election to be overturned and the Secretary of State denying him in his request. We can talk about the Fani Willis question first. Does that hurt this trial? And if not, how strong is the case against Donald Trump there?
So, again, it's really important to understand that the ethical allegations made against Fani Willis are really unorthodox. Typically, when you have allegations about prosecutorial misconduct, it's usually about violations with regard to a prosecutor having a relationship with a juror or a litigant or the judge, not with someone else on her own team. So by itself, that was really unusual. And again, money is fungible. If Nathan Wade is paying for something and then he is reimbursed, it's not like he got this job so that he could take Fani Willis to Belize. But yes, the optics of it are bad. And they're intentionally bad because the end game here is because this case is so strong, because there is that phone call with Brad Raffensperger, that this case was actually one that could result in serious criminal time for Donald Trump and the 18 other defendants. And we've seen from the beginning an effort to limit her authority as prosecutor. There was a formal administrative effort to do that. It failed. And now we are turning to this ethical quagmire that's been ginned up. And it could result in her disqualification. I don't know that it will because I don't know that it rises to the level. But at the very least, it does muddy the waters, put some chum in the waters in Georgia that may make it more difficult for her to prosecute this case before a jury of 12 men and women who have to weigh these charges.
So, Andrew, the case that sort of slipped from the headlines is the one about the classified documents. And there are some valid reasons why that one's moving more slowly, because they are classified documents and there are clearance issues. But the former president also drew a pretty Trump-friendly judge. What's your assessment, and what does the book tell us about that case? Does it remain perhaps the most open and shut, but also so tentative because he can make it go away if he's elected again?
So the two federal cases, the Florida case and the D.C. case, are ones that the president, even if there's been a trial, he can tell his Justice Department to just get rid of it. Now, he would need to have court approval to do that, but there's limited authority for the courts to say no. I agree that because they're classified documents, there are reasons that the case would be slower to deal with those issues. I don't think it justifies the pace that it's been going on, which is somewhere between like turgid and moribund.
Glacial.
So we could add like our thesaurus of slow. And there now are numerous reasons that have been given to Judge Cannon to keep it on that very slow pace, including, as I mentioned, this immunity argument, even though this is conduct that happened after he was president. So there really is no claim of immunity because he will then appeal that. And the same process that we're seeing now in D.C. is something that we can see in Florida. So there's ample reason for Judge Cannon, if she does what she's continued to do, to slow walk that case and essentially have a de facto veto on those charges.
Can I say one more thing about this? I mean, and this is something we talk about in the book. Like, lots of people are wondering, how did he draw Judge Cannon again? And that's a factor of politics. There are 3 vacancies on the Southern District of Florida. The problem is that Florida has 2 Republican senators. So anytime Joe Biden wants to nominate someone to fill any of those 3 seats, there's pushback. And those senators won't give their blue slips. So those seats remain empty. And when this case goes in the hopper to assign a judge, there's a 1 in 3 chance that it's going to be Eileen Cannon. So that's a politics question. And it's something that we explain in the book so readers have that background context.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
Hey, General, let me into the war room to see you. So I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not? Please. Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah. I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
Ambush was just a diversion! Security, please bring up. Ravage, he's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark. General! General! Hold on. National security advisor. Stay down. Check it out. There is a celebration for the amateurs for suicide mission.